You're listening to The Grind. Well-caffeinated conversations with disc golfers who are passionate about improving their games and helping others to do the same. Welcome to episode 11 of The Grind, a disc golf podcast. I'm Josiah, and with me, my good friend, an occasional card mate on casual rounds, not yet in tournament rounds, David.
One day. How's it going, guys?
I got to pick up my skills, get up to advanced, and then I'll kick your butt.
I mean, your skills are there. It's just applying it in the round in the tournament, and then I'll be able to kick your butt in advance, and I'll enjoy that.
Well, it's happened before, and then I ran back to intermediate. All right, so we have a great episode lined up for you today. We are going to have a pro tip from Joel Freeman. We are going to talk about how to deal with weird card vibes, and we are going to review the Innova Gator3. But David, of course, I've got to ask, what are you sipping on, and how was your disc golf week?
Dude, we got some cold brew this week. Sipping on, it's from Costa Rica, the Naranjo region. It's from a farm called the El Chayote farm.
I'm so glad that you're the one who has to pronounce these words and not me.
And the farmers are the Aguilares brothers. And this is actually a coffee that is kind of hits home for me because actually my wife and I and a couple buddies we were hanging out down in Costa Rica and hanging out on this farm when COVID first hit, fun fact, and got to know some of the family a little bit. They're super fun people. So before we get to the coffee, the people themselves, they have a soccer field in the middle of their coffee farm, and they literally invite and challenge other families that own coffee farms in the area to come out and play them in soccer.
That's awesome.
They have like a whole they literally have a locker room that they can all change and stuff down. It's fantastic. And they use the field for drying their coffee as well.
Okay, cool.
So super
When they
rad.
do that, do they like spread out some kind of tarp or something?
They spread out tarps and put whether they're drying a natural coffee or they're drying regular green beans.
And if you are drying a natural coffee, you have the fruit or the cherry on the coffee. Yep. If you are doing like a wash coffee, how do they get rid of that fruit or cherry?
So they first pit it from the cherry.
And how do they do that? Is that hand or the machine?
I forget what it's called. It's a machine.
Okay.
There's a machine that does the work. And then after that, they wash the beans and then they dry it.
Okay.
And so they're washing it because there's residue left on the bean from the cherry.
Yep.
And actually, that is important with this coffee. This coffee is called a honey process coffee.
Okay, I was just going to ask about that. So that worked out well because I've heard honey process and I've tasted it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a honey process. So it's similar to natural coffees we've had before on the podcast. You actually dry the coffee with the cherry on the bean. The honey process, you pit it from the cherry, but you actually don't wash it. You dry it with the residue on it.
Okay.
And so they call that the honey.
So it's not actually honey. It's just like something in between a natural and a wash.
Yeah, I think it's how they communicate that it's sweetening the bean.
Yeah, okay. I really thought that they put some kind of like diluted honey solution on it when they were drying it or something.
I bet you more than 50% of people actually believe that. I first was
much
getting in,
more than 50%.
When I was first getting into coffee, I believed coffee was grown in Italy because there was the Italian roast.
Yeah, well, that checks out, you know? I feel like all the terms sound like Italian as well. Yeah. Are they Italian? Like Arabica and all that?
No, they come from Africa.
Okay.
So the beans themselves originally came from
Africa.
And
the terms are also from Africa?
Oh, no. I'm sure I'm not positive at all, but I assume they're Italian, Latin-based.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not positive. This family, amazing family. Actually, the great-great-grandfather was the first grower in this Naranjo region. So just a lot of history there. Fantastic cup. This is I love cold brew. It's not necessarily my go-to, but I enjoy it every once in a while because you get that kind of punch of flavor. What I'm getting out of this is more like kind of almonds, like buttery almonds, maybe is how I describe it. I'm actually not 100% positive. I don't remember the tasting notes on it. So
yeah, no, I definitely get that for sure. I think that cold brew for me is an occasional enjoyment because the caffeine hit is real.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You have to be prepared for it, and usually I don't finish my cup.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was glad it was a very reasonable portion that you poured us because I was like, by the end of the show, I'm going to be off the wall.
Yeah, for sure.
How was your disc golf week?
Disc golf week was pretty good. I think I had 2 rounds this week. I was trying to divvy up my week into resting and playing around to make sure I was still stretching out. So I got a round in on Saturday. We actually did a practice round in Delta with Dylan, and it ended up being my best round, I think, at Delta. I shot
What'd you score?
-5.
Okay.
And it was a clean round.
Yeah.
I think the back half was, and again, going back, we talked about in the second cup, Delta's kind of fun because if you don't get one hole, you have a chance at the next hole to get a birdie. And so even though I was...
Tough birdies, but all attackable.
Yeah. So even though I was unhappy on the front 9, I think I finished -1 through the front 9. I knew I still had a chance to have a really great score to finish because I just needed to... You just need to be consistent and attack when you can. And so
I feel like a clean round feels really good because if you hit early trees,
you're punished.
you can give yourself a hard time. And then the par 4s, it's really easy to mess those up and give yourself a bogey, especially that first one because it's a fairly tough drive and there's a lot of big bush kind of like brush that if you get into any of those, you're going to have a very hard time parring. And then the green is really tight and tough to get to. So, yeah, I feel like a clean round is great. And honestly, like 5 birdies, like in the tournament, we have a tournament coming up on Sunday. I feel like you're going to get 5 birdies, no problem each round. So if you can keep it clean, then you're going to do well.
Yeah, for sure. And my backhand was clicking on Saturday, which I was excited about. I had 3 backhanded drives that I landed exactly, for the most part, where I wanted to be.
Awesome.
Birdieing 2 of them, which I was stoked.
Yeah, for sure. Well, especially... we mentioned it in the second cup, but I'll brag on you again. Probably the longest backhand-only hole on the course, about 375, a gap to hit, and then kind of an open straightaway, and then a pretty protected green, and you parked it. So I wasn't there, but you texted me. So if you're not going to mention it, I'm going to mention it. Your backhand's coming along, man.
Thanks, man. I was pretty pumped for sure. Then I got around in at Snooks on Wednesday. Just wanted to get out and stretch it out. I threw a back. I was practicing some backhand shots and forehand shots. I was practicing we're reviewing the Gator3 later in the podcast. I was throwing that around some and trying to get a feel for it. It was a fun week, man. Definitely focused a little bit more on rest and mental game, but definitely a fun week and feel productive. So how about you, man?
Yeah, it was a good week for sure. We played horse at your house on Sunday, which I'll bring up.
I forgot about that.
I don't know why you forgot about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
And I just cleaned out David and Micah the first round, and then had a massive comeback from behind to beat Micah the second round, and David, to be fair, but David was out early. My son, when I was way down and Micah was killing me, I think it was you or asked him if...
Yeah, I think I asked him.
If I was going to win or Micah was going to win, and he was like, Micah. And I was like, all right, it's over. And then I just took Micah down after that. I was like, my own son doesn't believe in me. At least I will.
You just saw Josiah's whole temperament change of I'm going to destroy Micah.
Yeah, I think I maybe missed one putt after that. And these are long, silly putts too. Yeah. No, I love horse, and I want to get in that mentality when I play in tournaments because, you had tried your step putt, which I never do, a bunch of times, and I missed it. And then I just walked up and canned it. I think it's this it's very silly, but it's this silly cockiness you can have with friends where they know that you actually don't think you're the stuff. Yeah. Where they know you actually aren't so stupid cocky that you can be cocky and it's safe. Where I feel like with card mates, sometimes you can't quite have that vibe and not seem like a jerk. So I want to have that at least internally where I'm I'm just going to make this 40-foot step putt, even though I don't normally step putt or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good week. Got a few rounds in and felt decent about my game. I feel like my game felt better and better as the week went on. And today I played 9 holes with John, your brother, and felt like my drive was really solid and was throwing some fun shots really consistently. My putt still needs some work, but I think my putt in the tournament is what it is, honestly. If I feel like I love the tournament pressure for putting because I feel like it focuses me so much more. And so if I can keep my body loose but have my mind focused, I'm going to do well. And so in some ways, I'm kind of looking forward to having that a little bit of pressure to force that focus on the putts.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. And horses, I agree with you. It's right there on giving you that mental game that you can translate to the tournament, which is fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm all about some horse. If you guys want a way to kind of work on that pressure, putting league is fun and horse is another way. And it forces you to try different tricks and different putts because your friends will mess with you or you'll mess with them with, a different putt angle or whatever. Cool. You want to get into a pro tip?
Let's do it.
So Joel Freeman, Colorado disc golfer, Innova sponsored, sent a pro tip. I asked Joel, what's one thing you wish you knew when you were first building your game? And he said, I wish I'd known to film myself. I thought I knew what I looked like, so I developed several years of habits before I actually analyze my form with the camera. The past 2 or 3 years, I have had my hands full because I've been trying to fix all my bad habits. And I feel like this is one for me that's very important, is to have a real idea of what your form looks like and then to be able to make changes. But it's also tricky for me because I'm not an extremely technical learner. I'm a nerd in a lot of ways, but when it comes to form, I feel like overthinking messes me up. I do think it's huge to actually have some idea of what you really look like and what your form looks like. What do you think, David?
No, I absolutely agree, because I've experienced this firsthand with my backhand, with processing through it. You have a concept in your head of what you think you look like. And in your head, you're just like, man, I feel like I'm doing everything right. I'm clicking right. And then when you actually video yourself, you're just like, I do not look as pretty as I thought I did.
You do look pretty. Your form is just jacked.
Yeah, there you go. I think the hard thing, though, is you immediately want to start picking everything apart, as opposed to look for the biggest thing for me is finding those 1 or 2 things and then slowly working out to figuring out what you can tweak.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But yeah, I love that he sent this in, because this has been huge. I know this has been big for you. You sent, I'm not sure what the guys' names are that you sent.
Overthrow Disc Golf.
Overthrow Disc Golf. I know you sent your video into them, and they gave you some great feedback on your backhand.
Yeah, for sure. I think that one of the big things for me is you have so many opportunities in life and in disc golf to improve your game in different ways, but there is this blindness you have to your own form. Unless you're just like ridiculously coordinated and athletic, you're going to make a lot of mistakes trying to figure out, especially backhand form, but both backhand and forehand. This could probably go for putting and upshots as well. And so I think this very analytical opportunity to look at your form, look at a top pro's form. I love looking at Macbeth, not just because he's amazing at disc golf, but because I think he and I are similar-ish size. I probably got him by an inch or two. And I feel like he approaches his throws with a very controlled movement. And so I love to just, take Paul Macbeth. There's a little difference in the form. There's a little difference in the skill. Minor, and just say, hey, I noticed this. And then you can take that one step, whether it's overthrow or Seabass 22 or there's a variety of different coaches who will look at your form. A lot of times you'll have to pay a little bit or be a patron or whatever, or just have a friend look at it, or have a friend do it while you're in round. I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is something that you and I have been meaning to do a little bit more, as both of our forms have changed maybe a little bit more over the past, especially mine over the past 6 months. I know you've asked me to record you, and I keep forgetting out on the course, but
it's all
I'm
good.
So focused on myself and how well or poorly I am doing.
Well, I did give you a hard task, which is like, take a video of my form, but I don't want to know about it.
Yep.
And the reason for that is I've realized that my form in the field work and my form with the camera on is slightly different than my form in round. And I want to capture my form in round and then compare it to my form in field work and see where that mental block is. One thing I was going to mention with this is that I have, with the video that Overthrow analyzed, I basically will keep these form videos in a folder on my phone or on my computer, in the cloud, whatever it is. And I took a video recently and realized that some of the changes I thought I had made, I'd either gone back or never actually fully made them. And I think the great thing about the video is it doesn't lie. Mm-hmm. And so I could look at a form from a year ago and look at my form now. I know it's improved slightly, but there's a reason that I'm not pushing past 400. And that I can look at that reason. For me, it's that last step starts to drift a little bit long and toe forward. And that's I think the first thing. And then the second thing with related is timing. I've got a little too much time where my arm is fully reached back. I'm losing momentum there. And so those two things, and I think that's really to do with trying to throw with my arm and trying to lead with my arm rather than my hips. And that's probably related to, once again, my foot pointed forward. That's me. But I just realized, hey, I've been lying to myself about what I need to be working on. I still need to be working on some of the same things and take a step back.
For sure. I can't remember whose video it was that I was watching recently, but they were talking about when you are recording yourself and translating it back to you actually applying it to your form, talking about over exaggerating, because when I think one player that was leaning forward so much that
I watched this video. That was really good.
When they just leaned back just a little bit, they thought they were standing up straight, but was
that Robbie C?
I think it was.
Yeah, that's a great video.
Yep. But
Robbie C on YouTube, great YouTuber, and I think that video talks about, basically, not to interrupt, but talks about how people think they are making a change and they're not. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. But the guy that was throwing thought that he was standing up straight because it felt different to him, but really he had maybe just moved like an inch. And to him, it felt like he was standing up straight, but he was bent so far over that he thought he was making more of an adjustment than he actually was. And so I love that he talked about just over exaggerating to the point to where it forces you to really redefine where your movements are, because your brain is so trained to respond in a certain way with your body that changing any small thing will feel like a lot, even though it's really not that much.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Is I think in general what you want to do is go from unconscious of your throw and bad at whatever aspect it is, to conscious of where you're bad, to conscious and good, to unconscious and good. In other words, you have to think about your form in order to fix your form, but you don't want to always be thinking about your form in throw, because that's going to mess up your form. And I think, to your point, I think with my toe forward, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be, but it's still a little forward. I need to emphasize, not in tournament, not going to make that adjustment right now. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But for me, I'm not going to try to think about it in tournament. But I want to emphasize getting my foot in the proper orientation, shortening that cross step, shortening that last step. And I may need to exaggerate it more to learn new habits, because muscle memory is good when you have good habits, because then you don't have to think about it at all. But when you have bad habits, like you're saying, that muscle memory works against you.
Yeah. One thing that has really helped me out with my backhand, one concept that I built in, is at times I felt like my body was out in front of my hips. And when your body's out in front of your hips, I mean, you're not getting any power from your hips. So I'm not getting the distance that I want. And so one thing that I tried to over-exaggerate practicing was leaning back a little bit. I mean, our buddy Ryan Wilking, I mean, he definitely leans back a decent amount when he's coming up for his throw.
I think with that, one of my problems is leaning back and then leaning forward.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is you want to be balanced throughout the throw.
Yep, for sure. I think I want to be balanced. So I'm focused on leaning back
in order to actually make yourself balanced.
Yeah, so I'm overcompensating in order to get myself to where I need to be. And so that's one concept that has really helped me build into my feeling like I'm actually having a continuous flow through my throw.
Yeah. I think I naturally assume that leaning back and then leaning forward will actually give you more power, and it takes so much away because you completely take your lower body out of the equation. Seems like it's a recurring theme, but you completely take your lower body out of the equation.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing, just getting back to, prepping for a tournament, thinking about form during a tournament, I asked Joel, because I was curious what a pro's take would be on this. How do you decide when just to roll with what you have for tournament season versus continuing to work on your form? I imagine that even improved form could lead to inaccuracy without a ton of reps. And I was kind of surprised by his answer. He said, I never stop working on my form. With disc golf still being young, there's not a right and a wrong way to do a lot of things. We don't have coaches and trainers yet to help us know if we're on the right track. From what I've seen, one of the biggest weapons that most professionals carry is their ability to experiment in the moment, but to do it with confidence. That allows us to try new things during tournaments so that we can improve long term. Ideally, this is during a not very critical moment. Maybe it's the final round and you have no chance for the W. So for the last 5 holes, you experiment with a slightly different routine or technique or something. Last year, Idlewild was the closest I came to winning a DGPT event. And at the beginning of the week, I reworked my backhand. I decided to go ahead and use it during the tournament, and I almost won. And he went on to say, I've also heard Macbeth say, I'm glad I'm not in the featured card today. I want to try a new putting style, and I don't want all the extra attention and commentary. I think creativity, confidence, and boldness are all a part of what allows pros to perform at a high level. In my eyes, part of that process is always growing. The growth never stops. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. And I felt like that was such an interesting take. I just didn't expect it. I kind of figured something much more, I don't know, mechanical. Like, hey, you work on your form for 2 months during the off season or a month during the off season, then you don't work on it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's fun and approachable for AMs because, I mean, really that's something that obviously as amateurs, we're continually trying to figure out what we're doing wrong and what we can do better. We think that what we really want to get to is to where we're not having to think about anything new. And I love that he says this because really that's kind of the beautiful part of the game is we're all just learning what we can do with the discs. And there's always new discs coming out and there's so many discs out there that do different things and just trying to learn and figure out what you can do in disc golf and around. It's fun. But yeah, this is definitely not something that I would have ever expected to hear from a pro on playing on tour, being willing to practice something in round. That's not something that I would necessarily do in a tournament. So,
well, and I love the idea of experimenting with confidence. I feel like a lot of times, you bring up the disc example. I think this is true about form as well. But a lot of times when you have that new disc, there's that new disc confidence that you have for a little while sometimes where you're just driving with it. I think about me and the Pyro right now, which as an update is in my bag for the tournament coming up because I just love the feel of it. And I'm getting pretty good at predicting the flight of it. But sometimes, when you have that confidence and you're experimenting, there's something free about it. There's something freeing about it. And I think that it goes against the conventional wisdom of like, oh, well, if you want to be consistent, you don't want to change things up. And you certainly don't want to change things up right before or during a tournament. It's very different than I expected, and I kind of like it. It in some ways is freeing to me.
Yeah, I think this is something that would be fun to try and apply. I think it would be definitely a discipline for me to try to apply this because it's maybe not something I would work in this year in a tournament, maybe later on in the season, depending on how I'm feeling. But it definitely is a mental shift for me in my game and how I approach tournaments. I think it's definitely willing to try out because, I mean, why not?
Yeah, well, and I like the idea too of being a little bit, like getting a little bit away from the results oriented. Like he said, hey, maybe not in a very critical moment. You're going to be like, hey, I'm going to try left-handed putting. But I do think that, okay, the tournament's not going that well. You talk about having a new goal. Maybe the new goal is, like he said, maybe changing up your routine a little bit or changing up your form a little bit. It sounds a little crazy to me when I say it out loud to be like, oh yeah, the round's not going that well, so I'm going to change up my form a little bit. But I think not necessarily trying to correct something because I think that's what gets you in trouble, but instead trying to experiment with something. To me, it has a very different feel. Like if I'm trying to correct my putt mid-round, I feel like that's just a recipe for disaster. But if I'm trying to experiment with something in some ways for fun or to get better, maybe that just that attitude shift allows for the confidence.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing I was going to mention with this, which I think you said, hey, I'm not going to mess with it this season, but you are messing with it this season because you're building your backhand.
Yeah.
Your backhand it's not static right now. Like it's always improving or changing. And you're still willing to go out there and throw those holes. So I do think maybe you wouldn't think about it like mid-round or something like that, but I do think you're saying, I'm going to take a tool that's not as consistent and be confident with it. And I love that.
Yeah, I definitely have committed to this season building confidence in a tournament using my backhand because I think I do it all the time in practice rounds, but I've never actually consistently gone to a backhand in a tournament because I didn't really believe in myself, and I'm trying to build that just belief in myself and the tournament, knowing that I've done it, I can do it.
Yeah, well, and you have the tools, so I think it's just being confident in it, even if you don't have the level of experience or trust. Naturally, based on experience, you can have the confidence. We talked about it in the second cup about having this. Even it's not false confidence, but this, basically using your brain to convince your body to perform well and saying like, hey, I've got this. My backhand's good. I'm gonna nail this drive, and then doing it. Not easy always to do, but I feel like it's much better than saying like, oh, I don't know if my backhand's gonna work today. I hope this goes well. Like the difference between those two thoughts is a difference in actual performance 98% of the time.
Yeah, and making the mistakes in round, for me, I feel like there's two drives particular backhand that I can look back on And I know what the mistakes were on those. One of them was, I was
This is
torquing
from our
over
last
from
tournament?
our last tournament, trying to get bite off too much distance. And so I turned it over. And then the other one, I tried to guide the disc with a hyzer as opposed to, I knew the disc was going to hyzer out. I just need to throw it straight as opposed to just throwing it straight and let the disc do the work. And so I think in the tournament, like being able to look back at that in the tournament is building those concepts that later on I am able to apply in the next tournament. And so, yeah, I agree. I didn't really think that. In some way, I'm applying this a little bit.
Yeah. And I think in so many of these pro tips and just in experience, so much about the game is having confidence and generating that confidence in order to perform, whether that's with a skill that you've been working on since you were 2, or that's something you've started working on hole 2. Just saying like, hey, I'm killing it with this disc right now. I'm going to throw it again because I'm experimenting, I'm having fun, and I feel confident. Mm-hmm. Well, a huge thanks to Joel. I really appreciate the detail he put into this answer and sending us the pro tip. I wanted to also talk to you, David, a little bit about how do you handle weird card vibes? Because I feel like I am affected by my card a lot. And when I have a fun card, I just play more loosely. I kind of have a certain sense of humor about the way I'm playing and a certain kind of, I don't know, just in general, I feel like my play is elevated. And when I've got a card that feels a little awkward, I sometimes have a hard time dealing with that. So how do you deal with it? What's your strategy?
No, I absolutely agree. A weird card can definitely impact your round, and a great card can impact your round too, depending on the people that you're playing with. I tend to try and find at least one person on my card that I connect with in some way. And now that we've been playing a decent amount of tournaments, I usually end up on a card with somebody I know. And for the most part, I will find somebody that we have some sort of connection and just enjoy playing the round together. But I've been on a card before where definitely created some weird dynamics. We had one round where there was one guy on our card that was having a really rough round, very, very, very rough round, and he was handling it fairly well. He was bummed, you can tell. But then there was one guy on our card he was having like a so-so round, not that great, not that bad. And he was just getting really upset about his round. And for me, I'm feeling bad for the guy that's having a really bad round. And the fact that this guy is acting in that way, it kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. It's like, man, dude, this guy, like, how do we respond to this? And so suddenly I just get quiet and I don't know how to respond. And I think trying to be the person on the card that is just being encouraging, because it might just be you that changes the dynamic of the card. But yeah, sometimes it's really hard to push through those rounds, and I've experienced that. Pushing through the round can be really hard. But I think you got to find something within that to be able to push through and feel like because when you're enjoying playing around with friends, when you're enjoying just playing the round, the game feels so much more simple. The game feels so much more fun as opposed to this grind to the next hole. And that's what it feels like. It feels like a grind sometimes when you feel like you're not playing with guys that you're excited about playing with. And so I think trying to figure out how to bring that fun back into it is huge. And it's not easy, but it's huge if whatever way that you can.
Yeah, no, I like the idea. I think you kind of mentioned something like this, but being the most positive person on your card in any case and being encouraging of your card mates. I honestly think, like at the Palisade tournament, I think that was one of the things I really worked on. And I actually had as an off-season goal that I wrote down this past off-season was to be a better card mate. And I think that's partially so I could play better, because I feel like if I'm a better card mate, my card's going to have better vibes. I'm going to, feel more confident and comfortable. But honestly, part of it too is like, I want the people around me to play well and to have fun, and I want to beat them while they're playing well. I want to beat people not because they had a bad day, but because I play better than them, even then when they're having a good day. And the other thing about it, the less selfish thing about it, I think, is in the end, we're out there to have fun. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason to feel miserable. No reason to pay to get into a tournament and feel miserable. Or there's no reason to go out and spend your time on a casual round and feel miserable. And so I try to build people up. I also am kind of careful about not being too corny, or, sometimes people when you try to compliment them and they're not playing well, they actually get more frustrated. So I have to test the waters a little bit. Like hey, I ran a circle 2 putt and it landed at the base of the pin. It was a terrible putt because I was running it, but it worked out well. And if you say like, hey, nice up, sometimes people are going to take that and actually be like, dude, you jerk. Like, so I feel like I usually will have to test the waters a little bit, but I try to be encouraging and build people up. And I also try to walk with somebody and talk to them and just try to like, hey, that was a great drive or whatever, individually occasionally, or try to build up people individually. And then if that doesn't work, I honestly try to disconnect myself completely from the card and not think about disc golf. Because sometimes I use the card to not think about disc golf, just to enjoy, hey, how's life or whatever, or to just think about somebody else's game rather than my own in like a positive way. But otherwise, I'm just like, hey, I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to treat this like I'm playing by myself. I'm still going to be a good card mate in terms of, scoring and everything else. But I'm just going to say, hey, this is a weird vibe and I can't fix it. I've tried to help it out. So I'm just going to disconnect. And I think playing some casual rounds on my own in some ways has helped me develop that skill, because I'm kind of like, okay, it's just me and the course, and it's a nice day or it's not a nice day, but whatever. I'm just going to play disc golf. And I don't like to do that, but sometimes it feels necessary.
I would say that I tend to disconnect as well when I end up on a card like that, but I don't play as well when I disconnect, because then I feel like I'm not actually being intentional about each shot. I feel like it's easier to be intentional when you're engaged with everyone. One of the things that I try to be the most disciplined at, I guess, is when you first have that initial greeting, when you meet at if you're doing a shotgun start and you meet at the tee pad with your group. Typically you have between 5 to 10 minutes, however long, to kind of connect to the guys. I usually like to ask, what they do for their job. Just small questions to feel like you can connect and understand a little bit of who they are, because then you have little conversational pieces that you could have throughout the round that's not just disc golf oriented. That kind of just lightens the mood a little bit. I think it, hopefully, I'm hoping to engage them on a human level. I'm not just out here because we all want to beat each other.
No, that's why I'm out there.
That's a fun aspect of it. It's at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we're using this, like, whether it's for mental health, physical health, whatever it might be for us. That's the goal. And obviously winning is fun, but I think bringing it back to the human and the relational aspect, that's when I feel like I'm having the most fun. Like, there's a couple guys that every single time I end up on their card, I walk up and I'm like, yeah, what's up? I think I've been on, shout out to Dylan James. He's a local guy in town that I think I played on his card about 4 times. And every time I get to the card, I get super pumped because I feel like him and I can relate on some level. We're about the same age. We have a similar approach. We're very competitive, but at the same time can recognize the fact that this is a game, and we just kind of have fun with each other in that, and we're about the same skill level, so it's super fun. So finding those guys that you can connect with and just be excited about, and figure out a way to get excited about with each other, and just saying that you appreciate them for just playing around with them.
Yeah, I really love that lighthearted, like, banter and competitiveness.
Yeah,
I feel like, especially for something that's not our job, to approach it with such a heavy-handed seriousness sometimes is over the top. And I think then your attitude is affected so much by your play. And so I do think there's something really fun about, no, I really care about playing well. I really want to play well, but I kind of want to play well in like having fun. And I do think that like we talked about in the second cup, but we played horse this week at your house, you and I and Micah. And I feel like that's like, it's competitive. Like, we all want to win. We're all trying our hardest. But it's also like relational and fun. And it's that, like, whenever you can have that mix, like competitive, relational, fun, I feel like there's some part of me that just, I don't know, I just feel like my game is elevated and I just have so much fun. It's like this, I don't know how to describe it, but I guess I'd say it's why I play disc golf.
Yeah.
And it's why I play with friends, or why I play disc golf competitively. It's not just to win. I want to win, but I want to win in a way that, like, I enjoyed winning, or if I lose, I enjoyed losing. And I feel like, the Kobe's of the world, the Michael Jordans of the world, they take this to a different level, and I think it makes them better. Like, I think they honestly are better because they are or were so cutthroat and so angry on the court in that case, the Tom Brady's of the world, But I think for me, this isn't my day job and probably never will be my day job. And so I could be that person and it may help. I don't know if it would work for my personality, but I don't really want to be that person.
Yeah, for sure.
So basically, how do you deal with awkward card vibes? I'd cuss everybody out on the first hole, make it awkward for them so they feel really awkward, and then internally be happy and enjoy the round. And so you can make it awkward for everybody else and then just kill it. That'd be my recommendation.
That sounds like a pretty freaking great idea.
By the way, David, next time we play, you suck. Oh, you want to get into a disc review?
Let's do it.
We got the Innova Gator3. It's a 5-speed, 2-glide, 0-turn, and 3-fade mid-range / approach disc. We threw just the Joel Freeman Glow Gator3 2022 Tour Series. And what'd you think about it, David?
It was interesting, man. I don't think I've ever thrown anything like it. Definitely, I was telling Josiah a little bit before, there was one hole in particular. I messed with it both forehand and backhand. It definitely can handle some torque. There's one hole it's a super fun hole in the valley, kind of one of the most iconic holes in Fruita. It's a hole that goes, you're kind of throwing down a cliff. It's super fun. Where it's located right now is only about 250 feet or so.
Yeah, but it throws, since it's so far down, it throws like maybe 180 or 200.
Because you're literally just throwing it down. But
it's kind of cool hole. It's a cliff, and then there's a big rock wall on the right side, and then you got trees left. So you do have to throw a controlled shot. Now David's figured it out a little too well.
I usually just throw my flat top Firebird on. I put it out high on a hyzer, and I park it 98% of the time.
Yeah, it's annoying.
And hit the basket about 10% of the time. But this one was, I would say, even a little bit more dumpy than my Firebird on that shot. And I'm thinking maybe because I'm throwing so far downhill, it has the time to really flip over. But I threw basically the identical shot that I normally throw, and it really dumped out to the right. And I still got right next to the basket, but it wasn't nearly as predictable as my flat top.
It wasn't as much
was.
of an ace run, is what you're saying?
It wasn't as much of an ace run.
Oh, poor guy.
But I like the predictability of it, especially on the backhand. It really, you can put it out dead straight, and it's not, I'm not going to throw it very far. I'm probably getting like 220 with it because it dumps out. And it has that very strong predictable. It's not, I think the glide on it is 2. So it's not going to go very far for you at all. It just really starts to dump out and finish. And it's a very predictable disc. I think I would kind of put it in the category for me as a utility disc almost. I think definitely I could see myself using it on a backhand some, using a lot of utility though with my forehand of getting out of places, because I think you can create some pretty wild shots with it. But yeah, I liked it. I think it'd be fun to mess with it as far as in practice rounds and stuff. It's not necessarily something I could see myself applying necessarily in a round right now, but it's kind of a fun disc.
What do you think about it compared to your zones?
Zone for me, I think because I've thrown it so much, the zone's going to be a lot straighter, maybe slightly more glide, and not nearly as dumpy at the end. But the zone's I think I've gotten to where it's so predictable for me, and I like putting the zone out on the hyzer and that would be one thing that'd be interesting is, it's definitely more overstable than my zone. One thing that'd be interesting for me is throwing this more flat and relying on it to hyzer out on the forehand as far as my predictability is compared to that with the zone. Because definitely with the zone, I'm putting out on the hyzer. I know I can put the zone out 200-foot hyzer, and it's going to finish generally where I want it to, 25 feet from the basket.
The zone, you're more basically, you're picking the line and throwing it, where the Gator would be, you're letting the disc do the work.
Yes, exactly. And it's something I feel like I would have to work on a little bit to actually understand it.
Yeah.
It'd be a fun one to mess around with longer. It was fun for me to throw. Definitely different than most things that I've thrown before.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. I like the Gator3 a lot. I like the plastic, that Innova Glow plastic was nice. It's a little gummy, but still stiff in the rim. The Gator3 was very flat topped, which I appreciated. Fairly shallow with a bead, smaller diameter, kind of same size as the zone, but with that beaded feel to it. I liked the feel of it. Backhand, forehand, all felt good. It reminded me a lot of the Prodigy A3, and I wonder if the A3 is in some ways based on a Gator. If you see a 3 from Innova, it means that it's a flat top version of whatever disc that the name is. So a Leopard 3 should be, in theory, be a flatter Leopard, so it should be a little less glide and a little faster in theory, a little bit more stable. And yeah, I liked it. It felt good. It felt a lot like the Prodigy A3. You haven't thrown mine before, but a lot like it. I think that the big difference to me with the A3 as well as the Gator 3 and the Zone is that the Zone is the stability is consistent throughout the flight. So it's stable to overstable in the early flight, mid-flight, and in the fade. So it's in some ways a little bit more, it's a little bit more of a point and shoot disc, where I think a Gator 3 and an A3, and I'm using them interchangeably, they are a little different, I'll get into that, are much more of a little less stable on the front end of the flight and the mid-flight than they are in the tail end of the flight. And I think a lot of that has to do with the bead. I think the bead slows down the disc a lot faster and ends up with that more of that dumpy finish. So I do think that they are fairly different, the Zone and the Gator 3, but I could see someone using either of them well for different shots. You just have a little bit different of an angle or an approach at it.
Yeah, for sure. There was one shot that I tried to put out the Gator 3 on that similar hyzer that I do with my Zone, and it looked kind of like my flat top Firebird, how it just flips up straight immediately and just felt like it just dumped out. There was zero glide.
just goes from hyzer to spike hyzer.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I think that, to me, I didn't really click with the Gator 3. Like, I liked it and I understood it pretty early on. I don't know if it was the feel or release or whatever. I threw it quite a bit, both forehand and backhand, and I just never quite clicked with it. I feel like there's discs like that where I don't know what it is, but it just never quite clicked. I think it is a lot like the A3. I think that the Gator 3 is maybe even a little less stable in the early flight than the A3. It seemed like it responded poorly to oat or off-axis torque, to wobble on my forehand. It seemed to maybe turn a little bit more, and then maybe because it had less glide, not actually push straight and dump, but rather just kind of like ride a little left on that wobbly flick and then die out. But when I threw it well, like cleanly, I felt like it was nice and stable to overstable in the early flight, and then did have that really strong fade. It's a good disc. I could see how someone could just absolutely dial in their upshots and approaches with it because it has that predictable finish. And so depending on the power level and angle, you're not going to go too far.
Yeah, I could definitely see this becoming, at any point in your game, I could see this becoming a reliable disc for an upshot disc for sure.
Yeah. And I think, in reality, having a less glidey disc is very important for wind and certain shots where you don't want it to go too far. You don't want it to get too high in the flight or whatever that is. Like, I think, glide is obviously in general a positive thing, but I think it's really nice to have some low glide discs in your bag.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you want to get into a rating?
Let's do it.
All right. So our rating system, 1 to 5. Dave and I each will rate it. Some are scores to 10. 1 is it's just not that great of a disc. 2 is it's a fine disc, but there's better options out there. 3 is it's a good disc, but it doesn't stand out. 4 is it's a fantastic disc, but it's not going to make my bag. And 5 is it's making the bag. So David, what's your rating?
I think I'm going 3.5 here because I think it is a good disc. I mean, it doesn't stand out, but I think it does stand out to me because it's different. It's unique. I think you can see yourself creating different shots with it. I think it could be a fun one to put in the bag to mess with, but it's not necessarily one that I'm considering at all to have in my bag at the moment. But I mean, I think if you're looking for an upshot disc, I mean, I'm always going to be pro Zone. I'm going to send people there, but this could be one that if you don't like the Zone, this could be one that would be fun to try out and see if it works for you. Yeah, so I think I'm at a 3.5.
Yeah, no, I buy that for sure. I think especially if you like a beaded disc and the feel of a beaded disc, whether it's backhand or forehand, I think that the Gator 3 may be for you. I'm going to give it a 3.5 as well. I think that for me, seems like it'd be a really good disc, but it just didn't click for me. And I think since I've thrown the A3 before, I'm used to the feel and the flight, but I don't think for me it stood out enough to give it a 4. But I did like the plastic. I did like the feel. I did like that it was flat topped. And I think if you're looking for a Innova approach disc, they have a lot of different molds, but I think it's definitely one to try out. So that is a 7 out of 10, a great score, and a great disc. If you would like to win a 2022 Tour Series Glow Gator 3, support Joel Freeman. Well, you won't be supporting him on the first one, but you'll probably buy more if you get this one. You can win one by visiting our Instagram page and looking for this episode post. Our Instagram is thegrind.dg. David, we got one new segment this week. It's the AMs Helping AMs segment. One of our patrons, Justin, sent us something that's been helping him, so I'm just going to play that now.
What's up, David and Josiah? Love the podcast. Keep up the good work, you guys. I wanted to share a little bit of a tip that I picked up along the way. I, like a lot of people, taught myself to throw far before I taught myself to throw accurately. And after a particularly bad tournament where I missed a lot of gaps in the woods, I decided I was going to work on it. And I found a spot behind my work where there's a container and a tree. They're about 10 feet apart. And I stood about 20 feet behind it and just threw putters through it over and over and over again. And I wanged putters off the side of that container and into those trees. I don't know how many times. But eventually I found that release point. And amazingly, I gained a lot of power when I did that. You're focusing on being smooth. You're focusing on hitting that gap. You're not focusing at all on how far you're throwing or where the disc is going after it hits that gap. And it did wonders for my game. I can throw accurately down a tunnel and feel confident about it now that I've done it over and over and over again. And it's not as fun as watching a disc, fly 350. But it has made a bigger help. It has had a bigger impact on my game than any other thing that I've done. So I hope that helps you guys out. Get some putters. I know you hear that a lot, but get some slow discs, some mids, and just work on hitting the gap and see how much of an impact it has on your game. Thanks again, guys.
David, what do you think about our first AMs Helping AMs segment?
I like it, man. I'm excited for this. I know this is something that you've messed around a little bit with.
It's funny, I mentioned it last podcast that I had been doing this a little bit, but it's cool to hear from Justin. He had a much smaller gap than I did.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've tried this once before a little bit with the soccer at Saltwash. There's those soccer goals they put out.
Yep.
And I was very terrible at it. And I stopped because I hate not being good at something. Even though I know I need to learn, I like it because I think hearing this again, I think is just it's good to hammer things home because again, I mean we've talked about putters multiple times, throwing putters and mids, but continually getting out there. This is something that, dude, I'm gonna get out there and try this because this is something that I know I need to work on in my game. This is something I know I don't have in my backhand. I think I have it in my forehand pretty well. Yeah, I know in my backhand, I'm pretty nervous about hitting a gap with trees.
Yeah, no, I love it. Obviously, I tried it before, but it's fun to hear Justin's perspective and his experience with it and how much it helped his game. And also, I think just generally the idea that if you focus on smooth and accurate, that the distance comes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of times something that we forget. And when we have to hit a gap and get distance, I think we usually will miss the gap as AMs.
Yep, for sure. And I'm back to, again, turning over my putters with driving, which is frustrating for me. So I know I've lost that release point to where I feel good about. And so I think this is for sure something that can help me redial that back in.
Yeah, go find 2 trees at the fields by your house and take your wizards out as your next wizards field work or 2 obstacles. I feel like that'd be helpful.
What I had in my mind was I think it's hole 5 at Saltwash.
Yep.
Just bringing all my putters out to hole 5 because it's basically a straight tunnel shot and just throwing my putters at the basket over and over again. It's just a 200-foot hole with it's about an 8-foot tunnel. To maybe a little bit bigger, 9-foot hole, 9-foot tunnel, something like that to the basket. I think that's probably where I'd start.
Well, and our buddy who's a former touring pro and an open player said, he a lot of times will just work on one hole. So I think that you are right where you need to be there for sure. I think that one of the big things that I get from a similar drill, I get a little bit of confidence in my ability to hit the gap once I kind of get it dialed in. I think I also get confidence in not throwing as hard and having a consistent result. Then afterwards being like, oh, those went actually pretty far. I think all of that's helpful for sure. And one thing the reason I picked this one, we had a few patrons send tips in so far. Anybody's welcome to send one, whether you're a pro or an AM. Just send us an audio file. Use the record app on your phone or whatever you want to use, and send us an audio file at thegrind.dg@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I'm sure our listeners would love to be benefited by your experience, something that helped you learn. That could be a tip, a drill like this. This could be a form change. This could be a disc that really changed your game. Whatever it is, feel free to send it. But I do think that for me, this has been super helpful for me. And because we have a tournament coming up with some tight early gaps, and then a lot of times, a fairly open path after that, or a tight gap along the way, either case, I feel like it's something that I want to get in maybe tomorrow before the tournament. It's just, I want to make sure that I can hit that early gap and feel confident about it.
Yeah, for sure. This is a segment that I'm really excited about because I feel like in general, we're lucky enough to have quite a few friends that go out and play together, but part of disc golf is the community aspect and being able to share and process as we grow. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And so it's fun to kind of grow that and growing our disc golf community as far as helping each other grow. And so thank you so much. I'm pumped to continue this segment.
Yeah, thank you, Justin, for sending that in, as well as the other folks who have sent in their AMs, helping AMs recording. We really appreciate it. Well, that's the episode this week. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, including a blurb on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you want to be a patron and listen to the Second Cup every week, which is our bonus episode, visit patreon.com/thegrinddg. And don't forget, as always, whether it's coffee or disc golf, to enjoy the grind.